Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the commencement lecture of the O.P. Jindal Global University, along with the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. This is the commencement lecture on driving shared prosperity, a 21st century priority for US-India ties. We are delighted to have you all come on board. Particularly in these extraordinary times that we live in. We are joined today by a stellar cast of people, and we'll get into the program very soon, where I'll introduce everyone. But for now, let me congratulate you for coming into the family. This gives us extreme happiness, and it's our pleasure to host you all today. So let me start by saying, firstly, that because it's been such an extraordinarily hard and difficult year for all of us present. I think it's particularly hard on the young people of this generation. Perhaps in recent history, at least in the past few decades, this is the hardest time perhaps to be a young person, especially a young person who is a student, a learner, because it takes that much more courage to imagine a future that looks a little different from the present one. A future that is whole, unbroken, and unfractured. Right? So, however, this commencement lecture, this cohort of everyone present here, of future learners, of educators, of hopeful people, I should say, should also be a visible reminder that this year is beyond simply disease and death and suffering, that this year also holds promise. And so this cohort right here, I think is primed and is suited to imagine a better future, and perhaps being given a broken world gives us an opportunity to fix it. And it is therefore an extraordinary moment for all of us to come together to have such people to be amongst this cohort, and hope that with the start of this commencement lecture, with the start today of your university lives, there is so much more that the world has to offer you, hopefully more than what the world has offered you in the past 2 years. And we are hoping that all of us together, the people who have been here, perhaps have seen a little bit more, and the people of tomorrow, which is you, can together craft a world that we can all be proud of. And with that, I will not take too much time, because we'll circle back to these ideas of the future and how to create a future of possibilities. I would like to welcome you once again. To start with, we have, to start the commencement lecture, there's no one better to start the commencement lecture than Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, who is, of course, a Rhodes Scholar, but also the founding Vice Chancellor of O.P. Jindal Global Institution of Eminence, deemed to be University JGU in India. He was appointed as the Vice Chancellor at a very inspiring and young age in 2009, when the university was established. And today, of course, under his leadership, JGU is one of only top, 20 universities in India, and the only non-STEM university which has been declared to be an institution of eminence by the government of India.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Shalini. Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. First of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this commencement lecture. In particular, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Richard Verma, the Executive Vice President and Global Head of Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs, MasterCard, and somebody who many of us in India have known to be as former US Ambassador to India. In fact, many of us had the opportunity to meet him, and some very important initiatives were promoted during his time as US's Ambassador to India. We also hosted him on a number of occasions, including a joint conference that we had with the Indiana University Maurer School of Law on the globalization of legal profession and its implications for India and US. So all those memories are being brought back to me as I see his presence in this commencement lecture. Let me quickly say that it's an absolute delight to welcome the students of the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, all those students who have joined the BCom Honors program and the BA Honors in Finance and Entrepreneurship, two undergraduate programs that the Jindal School of Banking and Finance has launched over the years. It's, as Shalini mentioned, it's indeed an extraordinarily a challenging time. But I want to congratulate each one of you for your resilience, your commitment, your dedication. You have spent the last year sitting in front of computers, doing online classes as you completed your high school studies, took up the examinations for high school studies also online, and then took up another examination to get the entrance examination for admission to university without even taking a vacation or a break. Here you are joining the university to begin your academic studies at the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. So congratulations to each one of you, including your parents and mentors and others. I also want to mention that OP Jindal Global University is well positioned with its multidisciplinary institutional framework to provide the kind of world-class education that you aspire to have. The university has been consistently ranked as one of the leading institutions. In particular, the QS World University Rankings has ranked JGU as India's #1 private university, but also the more coveted status of being an institution of eminence declared by the Government of India gives us greater degree of responsibility to fulfill our own institutional goals and aspirations. You are all students at the Jindal School of Banking and Finance at a time when we have committed ourselves to promoting interdisciplinary education. When you study at JSBF, you not only focus on what the JSBF as a school intends to offer, but because you're part of a multidisciplinary ecosystem, you end up also taking courses in the law school, in the international affairs school, in our public policy school, in our liberal arts school, in our journalism and architecture and environment and sustainability and psychology and other such schools that JGU has. This alone, I believe, has the potential to shape your own thinking when it comes to pursuing undergrad education. I also want to mention that one of the things that you need to be mindful as you study your courses is that the dramatic changes that the world is witnessing, not just now, but even before. Some of those changes are going to last long. But in a way, one of the questions that academic institutions like us are asking is that how do we prepare young people for jobs that may not exist in the next decade, in the next 2 decades or so? To what extent are we preparing young people to assume roles and responsibilities in the broader world out there in areas and sectors which will emerge in the future? Obviously, to some extent, one can argue that artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning and other aspects of technology and entrepreneurship will define the future. But it is also a time when it's important for us to prepare ourselves to develop the kind of knowledge, expertise, and skills that can transcend both time and space. And that's why the brick and mortar campuses, such as the ones that we are part of, still are relevant. While online education does fulfill certain important goals and aspirations of educational imagination, a lot of what we do is also about developing creative thinking capabilities, developing an analytical mind, developing critical thinking capabilities, and also engaging with each other as a part of a community. These are experiences that we hope to foster. I know that the last year has been very difficult, and as an institution, we have not been able to open our campus physically, but we sincerely hope that in the weeks and months to come, we will be in a position to do so, subject to the COVID situation and other safety protocols as well. Lastly, I want to say that this is an opportunity for you to recognize the privilege that all of us have, even pursuing education in this medium. UNESCO has estimated that over 1 billion children and learners have been completely out of the learning system due to COVID. Even in a country like India, which has made significant advances in technology, the fact remains that only 15% of Indian households have 3 things that are critical for essentially pursuing online education: a reasonably uninterrupted electricity, reasonably uninterrupted Wi-Fi, and a reasonable equipment, all 3 of which are needed to pursue online education. And I must confess There are a lot of young people, including in schools and colleges and universities, simply do not have the privilege to pursue that type of education. So for all those students who are part of this program today, and indeed have become students at the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, be conscious of this privilege, and with all privilege comes responsibility. You do have a responsibility to make the best use of your education, to transform the social conditions, the economic conditions, and the wider society, regardless of whichever career pursuit that you might have, in whichever walks of life you may end up pursuing those careers. So with those words, once again, I would like to congratulate each one of you for joining the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. I also want to welcome the new faculty members and the existing students and the existing faculty of JSBF for the new academic year. The new students will be beginning their classes on 16th August. And of course, that the existing students have already begun classes this morning. So it's a fascinating semester ahead. And I look forward to meeting all of you in person sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajkumar. Those were really inspiring words, even for those of us who've been around. With that, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Ashish Bharathwaj, who serves as the Dean of the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. And he wears many hats. He's an economist. He also has a law training. He focuses on technology innovation, on market competition, on patents. And therefore, he serves as Executive Director of the Office of the University Office of Rankings, Benchmarking, and Institutional Transformation. He's also the founding director of the Jindal Initiative on Research on Intellectual Property and Competition, JIRICO. His list of accomplishments is large, but I think he's a better person to encapsulate what JSBF today stands for. Over to you, Professor Ashish.
Thank you so much, Shohini. Thank you, Raj, for those inaugural remarks. A very good afternoon to all of you joining from South Asia, and good morning for all those who are joining us from the US. I'm Ashish. I'm the Dean of Jindal School of Banking and Finance at OP Jindal Global University. I once again welcome all incoming students of the BCom Honors Program and the BA Honors Finance and Entrepreneurship Program, all parents, friends, all our partners who've joined us today. I'm really grateful to all my faculty and staff colleagues from the school, from other schools of our university, our current students who are currently joining us live on YouTube. I'm really glad that you could join us today. In this new academic year, which has begun today for current students, and it's going to begin for the incoming students very soon, we will have over 3,000 new students joining us from different parts of India and from outside India, who will be joining the JGU community, including you, our incoming students, who represent more than 21 states of India and 3 countries in this incoming batch. It is an honor for me and all of us to host Dr. Richard Verma to deliver the 2021 commencement lecture. He's an extraordinary thought leader with extensive experience in finance, in public policy, in geopolitics, trade, and of course, law. Before I introduce Dr. Verma in greater detail, we would really like to show you a very short clip, especially to all the incoming students, about Jindal Global University and our banking and finance school. Kirti, could you please plug the video?
OP Jindal Global University is a role model for excellence in social sciences through interdisciplinary teaching, rigorous research, and global exposure offered by all its schools, including the 8th school established in 2018, the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, JSBF. Our vision is to evolve as an institution that focuses on new technology-led banking, finance, and allied fields to develop professionals who are aware of ethical and social issues in finance of both local and global relevance. Our mission is simple. We want to engage students in a hands-on, practice-based curriculum to make them future ready. JSBF has redefined finance and commerce education to keep pace with the non-stop digital disruptions that are transforming all sectors, businesses, households, and institutions. Our students will be in a position to understand and address the post-pandemic challenges that India will face. They are evolving into socially responsible thought leaders to contribute to India's financial resurgence, economic resilience, and social progress. JSBF offers the hugely popular BCom Honours, and starting August this year, a unique first in India BA Honours in Finance and Entrepreneurship. Although BCom has been around for 100 years in India, we have introduced some path-breaking innovations, including alignment with the US-based CFA Institute, strong partnership with London-based Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, training for CA, partnership with the National Stock Exchange, wherein students learn about the stock market on virtual trading terminals, training for SEBI's valuable certifications on securities markets, and a heavy emphasis on business cases and simulations from the world-renowned Harvard Business Publishing. Our students can specialize in finance, accountancy, risk management, banking, law, fintech, analytics, or in entrepreneurship to become consultants, researchers, entrepreneurs, auditors, or investment bankers. We are guided by our advisory board of senior bankers and scholars from Morgan Stanley, Yes Bank, Barclays, Deloitte, Goldman Sachs, King's College London, Yale University, Deakin University, among others. To make learning industry relevant, even during the ongoing pandemic, we have hosted high-level C-suite executives to engage with our students, including speakers from Citibank, from Paytm, from SEBI, from HDFC Bank, scholars to discuss contemporary issues around gender, finance, and financial inclusion, CEO of the largest bank in China and in the world, senior economists from the Finance Ministry, Government of India, policymakers from the National Institution for Transforming India, also known as Niti Aayog, and in January this year, we hosted a special lecture from Venkatesh Jindal for students from JGU and Nottingham about JSPL's success story. JGU's middle name is global, and we are living up to it remarkably well. Several of the 300 plus international partners of JGU have opened their doors to our commerce, finance, and entrepreneurship students for different types of programs, including short-term study abroad, semester exchange, and dual degree partnerships. Several of our students have signed up for these programs, including at the prestigious Wharton School at UPenn, ISDE Spain, University of Wollongong, Queensland and Macquarie in Australia, New Brunswick in Canada, Queen Mary University London, Birmingham City, Southampton and Aston in the UK, and many more around the world. JGU has robust mechanisms to help students unleash their career potential. To complement our globally benchmarked curriculum, students do many other exciting things throughout the year. Many parents ask, how do Jindal students of commerce, finance and entrepreneurship spend their semester breaks? They work as interns in an amazing list of companies in banking, fintech, digital payment startups, accounting firms, private equity firms, FMCG companies, and they even help strengthen their own family-run businesses. They also do research internships with faculty to learn the art and craft of academic writing. I invite you to check out their published work on jsbf-report.com. For most students, this is their first formal publication. You will see more than 50 articles published by our students on topics like new farm bills, artificial intelligence, NPAs of public banks, corporate governance, energy sector, and even contemporary issues of domestic violence and economic impact of COVID-19. They also participate in international workshops and competitions on finance and data analytics. In January this year, a team from our school won a cash prize and a Viewer's Choice Award in a global data competition hosted by a reputed Canadian university. It is important to note that our first batch of students will be graduating this year. Many have already secured admission in leading universities, including the University of Westminster, Queen Mary University, UCL, and Warwick Business School for different masters and MBA programs in international finance, investment management, data analytics, and business intelligence. This speaks volumes of what they have studied and how well they have studied at JGU's finance school. None of this would have been possible without our faculty, the backbone of our school. With 5 founding faculty members, we have grown 5 times in the past 3 years. Our faculty are alumni of top-ranked international institutions like University of British Columbia, Louisiana State University, Barcelona Graduate School, NYU, National University Singapore, Oxford, Iowa State, and leading Indian institutions, including the Delhi School of Economics, IIMs, ISB, and the reputed IITs. Our practice-based teaching is carried out by faculty who are certified auditors, chartered accountants, and bankers who have worked in some of the biggest companies, consulting firms, and investment banks in more than 6 countries. We are all proud to be working together at the Finance School of India's #1 ranked private university. Based on consultation with our advisory board members, with JGU's senior management, and understanding the needs of the job market, especially post-pandemic, our future plan involves innovation and it involves growth. 4 drivers will facilitate this: making our curriculum ready for jobs of the future, enhancing quality of our online teaching and learning, offering more international opportunities, and strengthening our outreach and promotional plans to accelerate enrollments and recruitment. Based on JGU's timely pivot towards online teaching in March last year, we have set up the Virtual Teaching and Advanced Learning Office, or VITAL, to bring about improvements in our online teaching and interaction with students. We are mindful of the fatigue and exhaustion that non-stop screen time can cause. As JGU continues to progress as an Indian institution of eminence and a globally ranked university, our own aspirations and dreams as JSBF have grown. We welcome you to become a part of an ongoing legacy by joining JGU and the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. You're going to have a memorable time that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
All right, thanks very much for watching that. There is a bit of similarity and resemblance in the voice, my voice and the voice of that the speaker in the video. But anyway, let me come to the most important part of this event today, the commencement lecture. It's a pleasure to welcome our commencement speaker. Dr. Richard Verma brings over 2.5 decades of international experience across senior levels of business, law, diplomacy, and even military. 7 months ago, Dr. Verma joined MasterCard as the Executive Vice President. MasterCard is, of course, one of the largest financial services and technology company in the payments industry, with connections across more than 200 countries and territories of the world. Earlier this year, Dr. Verma was promoted to General Counsel and Head of Global Public Policy of MasterCard Worldwide. In his role as the US Ambassador to India between 2014 and 2017, he oversaw one of the largest US diplomatic missions in the world and took integral steps to deepen bilateral ties between US and India. He's a veteran of the US Air Force. He has served as the Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs, where he led the department's efforts on Capitol Hill, and I was the former National Security Advisor to the Senate Majority Leader for many years. The title of his 2021 lecture is Driving Shared Prosperity, a 21st Century Priority for US-India Ties. Over to you, Dr. Verma, for the commencement lecture.
Well, thank you so much. It's really such an honor to be here with all of you on this auspicious day as the students launch their studies at one of the finest universities and schools of banking and finance. I want to especially thank Professor Sangupta, Professor Chancellor Rajkumar, and the very fine dean who invited me, Ashish. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you gave me the chance to be up very early with all of you at 6:45 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. You know, when I was an ambassador, I had the pleasure of speaking at a lot of different universities across the country, including several graduation and commencement addresses. And one that I recall quite fondly was the graduation address I gave at DAV College in Jalandhar in Punjab. This is the same institution where my father graduated in 1953. And what an honor to go back and see the campus, go to the classrooms where he studied and learn about his time there. It was such a privilege. I also recall on that day, it was approaching about 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the assembly hall. And they asked me to wear a heavy ceremonial graduation gown and hat. It was so hot, it was like running a marathon while giving a speech. And I didn't think I would make it through without fainting, to be honest. But somehow I did. So getting up at 6 a.m. and sitting in my home office with all of you doesn't seem so difficult after that experience in Punjab. But really, it is an honor to be with all of you. And I wish I could be there with you in person. I know it's been a very difficult time for many of you and your families coping with yet another variant of this deadly pandemic, and I'm hopeful we're getting to the other side. I saw an encouraging statistic recently that indicated some 4 billion people across the world have been vaccinated, including more than 400 million people in India. And while we still have a ways to go, that is a lot of progress in a short amount of time. I'm also encouraged by what the US and India have pledged to do together with regard to vaccine development and deployment. In March, President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, along with the leaders of Australia and Japan, pledged to support India in the manufacture of 1 billion vaccine doses for your country, but also for the broader Indo-Pacific. And this is exactly what we need, more of this cross-border cooperation amongst friends and partners. That'll certainly be needed in the future as new challenges arise. Now, the title of this talk is Driving Shared Prosperity, a 21st Century Priority for US-India Ties. And I realize this is the commencement lecture for the School of Banking and Finance, not the School of International Relations. But I also want to connect the dots for you between US-India ties, our work together in the field of economics and trade, and your studies and future career path and the impact that you can have, which I believe will be quite significant. And we'll do this relatively quickly in the next 20 minutes. No one likes to be lectured on Zoom for much longer than that. So 3 topics, and I'll get at them straight away. 1, the importance of US-India relations. 2, what we have done and can do together commercially. And 3, what you all can do personally at an individual level. So first, US-India ties. Some of you may not know this, but the modern US-India relationship is actually quite young, just 20 years old. We marked the start of this era with President Clinton's visit to India in the year 2000. It was a breakthrough visit after decades of being somewhat distant and at times even estranged. You might wonder what happened. Why did it take more than 50 years for the US and India to start working together closely? Well, it was our alignments during the Cold War that kept us apart, along with other differences over China, Russia, Pakistan, and so much more. It reached rock bottom in the year 1971 when the US Navy actually deployed its 7th Fleet to project power against India in the war that was taking place in then East Pakistan, today Bangladesh. I mention these points because history matters. It's why when Prime Minister Modi addressed the joint session of the US Congress a few years ago, he said, quote, "We had finally overcome the hesitations of history in our relationship." And I think that's true, but it took a long time. And to this day, the relationship remains fragile. And there were costs. For example, in 1985, the two-way trade numbers between the US and China and the US and India were actually almost the same. Well, if you fast forward to today, the US-China trading relationship is 7 times that of the US-India relationship. So my point is, we missed a huge economic opportunity for our collective populations, and we have to continue addressing that deficiency. Now, I should also note that 50 years ago, in 1971, in this month itself, my father and mother settled in the United States in a small town in Western Pennsylvania. They knew no one, had virtually nothing other than what they carried with them, but like millions of immigrants before them and after them, they had a dream for a better life for their children. My mom and dad were teachers. My mother was a special needs teacher. My dad was a professor of English literature. You can imagine what it was like growing up in a home with 2 Indian teachers, where receiving an A- in high school was treated with concern, not celebration. I wish that was a joke, but it's really not. But both lived through difficult and tumultuous times as teenagers. My mother was a refugee in 1947, forced from her home during the partition, ending up in Jalandhar, but then trained as a social worker in Gandhi's Sewagram ashram. Their stories are ones of struggle and perseverance. My father was the eldest of 11 children and the only one in his family to ever attend college, let alone go on and get his PhD. My mother and grandmother were school teachers in a government girls' school that still exists today. When I was ambassador, I went to that school and I met so many people in that very special neighborhood. A number of older people came to greet me. They squeezed my cheeks and said, "But for your mother and grandmother, we would not be here today. They kept us on the right track." That was a very emotional moment for me, and it helped connect the dots for me from this journey from Punjab to Pennsylvania, where they were tested yet again. We had a wonderful upbringing with my parents retaining the best of our Indian culture and traditions while also embracing our new country. Little did they ever predict that their youngest boy would return to India one day as the American ambassador. That is the longest of long shots, but it's also a very uniquely immigrant story. I mention our own personal story because our story and so many like it, that is the glue that ultimately holds our two nations together. It is the story of education, of business, of family ties that connect countries together through up and down times. But it's also not a coincidence that there are 4 million Indian Americans in the United States, with 1/3 of the tech startups founded by people of Indian and South Asian origin. We are drawn together by shared values of free and open market-based democratic systems, the world's oldest and largest democracies. We value education, entrepreneurship, and our families. We are kindred spirits. You know, the Secretary of State was in India last week, and he mentioned that President Eisenhower, who was the first president to visit India in 1959, gave a set of remarks at the US Embassy in New Delhi, where he asked the young children gathered there, he said, "What do you think the world will be like in 2019? He said in a nutshell that if the US and India were working closely together, then these young Indian and American children could look forward to a better world in 2019. And then decades later, in 2005, then Senator Biden declared that if in the year 2020, the US and India were the closest friends and partners, the world would be a safer and more prosperous place. So think about that. We've had two predictions from two US presidents about 2019 and about 2020. And here we are in 2021. We can no longer look decades into the future. The time to deliver results for our people is now. It's today. And that's a big challenge. But it's exciting for us here in America and for all of you in India, especially as you start your studies and then your careers. And the reason I care about this subject so much and want to talk to you about it today is that I do think this is the most consequential relationship of this century. We can do so much together, whether it's battling a pandemic, countering terrorism and proliferation, or bringing to market all those new innovations and solutions that will make people's lives easier, safer, greener, more prosperous, more inclusive, more secure. We can do that. We are not there yet, but we can get there. Now, your generation will chart the course. And trust me, we are today trying to put in the pieces that will allow you and the US and India to be doing more together, and where your customers, your joint research, your best friends will all have a connection to the United States. We've started down that path, but we can do a lot more. So now let me turn to our commercial relationship and the business opportunities between our nations. Many people say that the US and India are too differently situated to become fully aligned economically. While we have shared colonial experiences, they came at different times. And our paths to rapid industrialization and modernization and development occurred over different periods. And yours is very much ongoing today. I look out at the year 2030, for example, and I see an India that may lead the world in almost every category. the most populous nation, the most college graduates, the largest middle class, the most cell phone and internet users, along with the third largest military, the third largest economy, all coexisting in the world's largest democracy with 600 million people under the age of 25. You have the youngest workforce in Asia, and you'll hold that advantage until 2050. Now, that's pretty formidable. That's on top of the massive development taking place in India today, right before our eyes. As you all know, some $2 trillion will be spent on infrastructure in just the next decade. The bulk of the infrastructure needed for 2030 is yet to be built. That's why some 100 new airports are either being constructed or planned just today alone. Now, this picture of India on the dramatic rise is what I witnessed firsthand when I traveled to every Indian state. And it's why I'm so excited for all of you. You have the world at your fingertips. Your country will have a leading seat in international institutions. Your businesses will continue to power economic growth and innovations globally. And all of you can choose what role you want to play today and in the future. And the fact that you chose to study at this institution at this time is another great sign that you're going to have a big impact. So back to US-India ties for just a moment. With America boasting the world's #1 economy and India on the dramatic rise, one would think we would have locked in a clear pathway ahead on the trade and economic front. The reality, however, is quite different. Yes, our people-to-people ties are quite strong. And yes, our two-way trade numbers are growing and now stand around 160 billion, but we have not come close to matching the expectations that have been set for us. We have no trade agreements, no bilateral investment treaties, very few structures that govern trade and commercial undertakings. Indian nationals find it difficult to obtain approval to travel to the United States. Few American students actually study in India, and many American businesses are confounded by the lack of regulatory certainty and predictability in India. And to top it of all, many in our populations are becoming suspect and suspicious of international trade, of immigrants, of global connectedness. Why? Well, it's a complex question. But this incredibly globalized economic system that has emerged over the last decade or two has created both winners and losers. And unfortunately, too many people have been left behind, unable to compete or thrive in an economic system that moves fast, but can also be rather forgiving. Right here in the United States, the wealth gap between the rich and the poor has more than doubled over the last 20 years, according to the Pew Research Center, with middle class incomes growing far slower than upper tier incomes. In India too, while there have been massive developmental gains, the divides between the rich and poor are growing more pronounced every day, with a recent Credit Suisse study finding that the richest 10% of Indians owned 80% of the wealth. Now, the current trends in both of our countries are not sustainable, and they have certainly had their impact, driving more people to question whether this modern economy, with all of its successes, actually works for them. It fuels a form of protectionism, nationalism, and populism, and this leads to greater fragmentation of the international economic and political system. When we need even more cooperation and coordination on everything from digital trade to data management and privacy, and yes, to pandemic response, the recent direction of travel has regrettably been to put up walls and design country by country systems instead of greater harmonization. Now, as students of finance and banking, think to yourself whether this is the right path or whether there is a better way. Now, one of the great things about your institution, as the chancellor said, is that it offers interdisciplinary studies. This means you will get to benefit from seeing finance and banking through the lens of other disciplines as well. And I'd encourage you to please take that opportunity, because you can be a great technician at what you do, but you can have a far greater and lasting impact if you understand these broader macroeconomic, political, and historical trend lines, not to surrender to them, but to address them directly and find the best solution for the people of India, who, as I noted, want to be and will be leaders in the global economic system. So a lot of work to do, but I know you can do it. And let me close with that. What can you do personally and individually? And I want to mention 3 specific pathways for you. First, focus on the economic inclusion challenge and bringing more people along in the modern economy and the innovations taking place around each of us each day. I know this has been a focus for Jindal from its founding. It does no good to have such incredible technological and economic advances if too much of the country cannot take part in or experience the gains. And I was really enthused to see the progress during my tenure here as ambassador and in my current role at MasterCard. I was so proud to see young American and Indian entrepreneurs working side by side with farmers, with handicraft people, in helping to bring their goods to market, to connect them with broader marketplaces beyond their local villages. Now, the older conventional wisdom was that if we just retrained the farmers and handicraft workers to work in call centers or as data input operators, that's how we would keep up with the modern technological advances. Now, some of that evolution may take place and reskilling can be important, but doesn't the more immediate and more impactful solution involve helping those same farmers and handicraft workers discover new markets, compete hand in hand with the large players, and in fact become key suppliers to both large and small players alike? Why should they have to give up their livelihoods when with some ingenuity, some technology, and some finance, we can make their livelihoods better? You can be a big part of that story through the marketplace, but in banking as well. There are still too many unbanked and underbanked in India, in the United States, where access to credit and electronic payments is too hard to reach. That is changing fast, but those gains do not have to be limited to people who live in urban centers. Our collective challenge is to reach rural populations who may live miles from a traditional bank, but who likely do have access to a cell phone. All of us can help bridge that gap with some creative uses of modern technology. It's taking place today, but probably not fast enough. Second, please do not lose sight of the important work you can do to help micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs. This is where the bulk of economic activity will take place. This is where, as experts in your field, you can have a big impact. SMMEs have been a key growth driver for the Indian economy, employing 110 million people, or over 40% of India's non-farm workforce. Businesses in this sector have also been critical enablers of distribution and supply chains for larger companies, contributing nearly 25% towards India's services GDP and 33% towards manufacturing output, enabling policies, regulations, systems, and practices that encourage and support the development of micro and small and medium enterprises is key to achieving the promise of shared prosperity and inclusive growth. But MSMEs have 3 major challenges: getting paid, getting capital, and going digital. And so your charge, along with the governments and financial service and technology companies, is to help these enterprises overcome these challenges by working together to improve the ability to receive and make payments more quickly and easily through access to proper business credit and debit products and tools, provide equitable access to funding that can support longer-term growth, and enable these enterprises to join the broader ecosystem of digital businesses. Now, addressing these challenges will enable these enterprises opportunities such as access to global markets for goods and services, increased share of online retail, and acceleration of their digital transformation. I know this will be an important focus in your studies, and your faculty have thought long and hard about how to support these micro and small and medium enterprises. We're really grateful for their work that all that you will do in the years ahead. And finally, please don't forget about the need to continue to have a social impact in the areas that you are passionate about. Now, we used to treat business and social responsibility and human development as separate endeavors, taking place along separate tracks. That is no longer the case. And again, I can speak from personal experience. Boards of directors, shareholders, and perhaps most importantly, customers want to know, what kind of company are you? Do you have a value set? Do you want to live by those values? Do you have a social impact where and when you can? That doesn't mean businesses become social services organizations, but it does mean that business and industry can and do have a huge impact on our everyday life. And at a time when governments seem gridlocked, they can have even more of an impact. Just take the issue of combating climate change. The public wants to know whether companies have a net zero carbon commitment. They want to know what the company's carbon footprint what the capital risk is from climate change, and whether that company's products and their suppliers are compliant with good environmental practice. Now, is that a social commitment or a business commitment? In my mind, they are now one in the same. You all can do so much more. Depending on where your careers take you, you can have a big impact on the quality of people's lives, their health, their safety, their economic standing. And by attending this prestigious institution, you have been bestowed a huge opportunity and honor. You've gotten here through your own hard work and the support and sacrifice of your family, teachers, coaches, and mentors. Now, for all of you to decide is, how do you want to return that investment that has been made and will be made by Jindal University in all of you? I would humbly suggest you consider giving back to your family, to your friends, to your community, your neighbors, to the voiceless who may need the additional help, or to those who feel isolated or marginalized. You will have the tools, channel them, deploy them. Don't sit on the sidelines. Your country is waiting for you, and we in the United States are waiting for you. Our future together is not preordained. We all have to work at it. Yes, we have big challenges ahead, but I know that working together, we can achieve a lot of big things that will have a lasting difference for millions of people. Thank you again for inviting me here today, and congratulations to all the students.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. It is so inspiring and so rare to hear a conversation about prosperity and economic prosperity being rooted in conversations about the human condition, about the collective human condition. So thank you so much, particularly for your personal stories and for rooting this entire dialogue in historic and contemporary challenges that arise both in the histories of both countries and what lies ahead. So Dr. Verma, there are many questions coming in at this point of time, but let me, as a moderator, take a direct advantage of having the voice at this platform to ask you the first question, because I think you touched upon one of the most challenging aspects and something that I am particularly interested in. You spoke about the unbanked and the voiceless, the marginalized. And in India, of course, there is a huge push, and there has been a huge push from both the government of India and regulatory authorities over the past few years to financially include people within the social net, within the banking sector, and all of this is sort of merging together. I was curious to know, as the public policy and regulatory affairs global head of a leading technology and payments institution like MasterCard, where do you see the connections between these kinds of efforts at India and not just MasterCard, but other companies like MasterCard? And a more direct question, how can young people, particularly people who are coming into programs like this, where do you see their role in this alliance?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you so much. I think, look, you have this massive laboratory is what I would call it in India. You have the opportunity to try and test a lot of solutions. And it's this incredible intersection of banking, finance, technology, entrepreneurship. I'd encourage the students, as I said, I think we have to get out of the urban centers a bit. We actually have to go sit with people and see what they're confronting on a day-to-day situation. And because I think some of the solutions we try to import, we can't have a one-size-fits-all kind of solution for everyone. And sometimes it's just having access to a bank account. And people don't have the education to do that or the technological resources. But you'd be surprised at how many people, well, you may not be surprised because you know the numbers, how many hundreds of millions of people are carrying around an iPhone or some sort of smartphone. And that unlocks a whole set of capabilities that they didn't have before. But they have to be given the confidence, they have to be given the training. And we have to be on the front lines of that. And I think access to an account is just the first step. As I mentioned, if they're in a profession where, they feel that they can't sell to other markets, giving them the exposure to other markets, connecting them up to the supply chain. So look, I think the more practical experience your students can have, and as faculty members, if you can, have some actual field experiences for your students where they're deploying some of these skills and working in the villages in particular, I think that would be the most important thing. And yes, I think the large technology players can play a huge role in actually just conveying knowledge and being thought leaders and partners. And we've done that and have been very proud of that record so far.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. I think the next sort of big question that I see coming out, and we'll get to some of the more other questions, but one of the big important questions that is being asked is, given the recent history in both India and US and what is even playing out right now, there are a lot of questions about the rule of law situation in both countries. And in that, I think we are somewhat united. Where do you think, and you spoke earlier, and Jindal, of course, focuses on interdisciplinary learning. Where do you think these different disciplines can merge on solving some of these critical issues of law, of diplomacy, of financial education? Where and how do we merge this to cater to improve rule of law situations in both US and India and several other countries across the world?
Yeah, and maybe I'll just limit my comments to kind of rule of law in the business area. Of course, we're both democracies, and we're working towards more perfect unions, as President Lincoln said to us, and that's a work in progress. In the financial sector, I think what companies are looking for is stability, predictability, transparency, level playing field, a chance to compete. And that's really in both countries. And again, it's not perfect in both countries. And we have to continue, as you said, bridge the gaps. And that means, policymakers and regulatory officials who, protect the interests of consumers, but at the same time, don't view business with a degree of hostility, and in fact try to find those solutions. I've served 2/3 of my career in the government. I know where government is limited. We can't move as quickly as the private sector. We don't have the technology that sits in the private sector. We don't create the innovations. We create the environment, we create the rules, and then we want the private sector working with civil society, working with academic partners to lift people up. And I think there is also a responsibility on business, right? To show that you're committed to individual welfare, improving individual welfare, to social impact, as I mentioned, and that you're not driven strictly by a profit motive. I think things have changed, right? As I mentioned, corporate social responsibility and business are not separate pathways. They are now one and the same. And I think the most successful businesses are ones that understand that. And so that's how I think, and that's the great thing about your institution, is this sense of interdisciplinary approach. You can be a great tactician or technician, but you really need to bring all this together if you want to have the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Dr. Verma, I know we have about 6 minutes of your time because you're on schedule. But I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to merge two questions here. Somebody's asked, what is the best mindset to create value in a business, given the sort of banking and digital transformation that we're seeing in the world today? But given your particular career in governments and different government functionaries, I want to ask you, what is the best mindset to create value in any kind of institution, whether it's a government or whether it's a business institution or even an academic institution? What do you think it's a mindset that all of us need to get into?
It's a great question. And I could go on for 60 minutes instead of 6 minutes. Let me mention a few things. First, look, the world's grown far more competitive. And so I think this notion of being expert at what you do, and thinking I know many of you are starting your studies today, but you really have to view this as a lifelong journey, hopefully not as a student, but as an individual that continues to learn over the years. I've been at this for a while, and I'm amazed at how much I don't know and how much I learn from the younger people coming up in the ranks behind me. And we have to continue to do that. So expertise in your field, I think, is critical. Secondly, sometimes taking some risk and hopefully being in an environment where failure is not penalized. And so calculated risk and supported by your colleagues so you can try new things, so you can do new things. I think also diversity of thought, diversity of opinions, diversity of people around you. I think there is this risk sometimes of groupthink, and we tend to all move down the river together without questioning whether it's the right pathway. And I think surrounding yourselves with different people, different ideas, people from different backgrounds is really, really critically important. And again, just having the confidence that you're doing the right thing, and the passion. And so those are just a few of the things I would mention. I think, again, the fact that you've chosen to study here, and I know this is a difficult time because of the pandemic, but that you've chosen to study here, this is going to be so exciting for all of you. And really, you when I say you have the world at your fingertips, I really mean that. But you also have a choice. As I said, US-India relations are not preordained. India leading the world in 2030 is not preordained, right? You have some choices, big choices in front of you about where you want to take these opportunities that have been bestowed upon you.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. I love the idea that, especially in these uncertain times, you talk about a future that is not preordained. It gives us a sense of control. And that's a lovely thought. And I think the last question, unless somebody here would like to ask a question, from my side is, which as educators, we are constantly faced. And at least people like me who are trying to bridge the financial side with the legal, social sciences side, is how do you create more empathy? We spoke a lot about creating values of interdisciplinary study. As a member of a leading technology and business institution, speaking to the crowd that you are, how would you talk to us about creating empathy in whatever paths that we choose?
Oh, it's a terrific question. And I, maybe having an experience as a diplomat is one where empathy is essential, because you have to sit across the table from your counterpart. And if you don't understand what that person brings to the table, what experiences that person has had, why are they approaching the situation that way, then it's very, very hard to make progress, and you start to talk past each other. So empathy comes also with humility. right? And learning from people in all stations of life. It comes, empathy comes with just patience and understanding for people, again, who may be different than you or hold different viewpoints. I think it's so important to have a core set of values and a core set of convictions, but that's very different than being empathetic and learning from people and understanding what people might be going through. Again, this has been a very, very difficult time over the last 2 years for many people. A lot of people have been set back. And so just understanding that situation, understanding that not everyone, as I mentioned, has benefited from this hugely globalized, fast-moving, technologically advanced economy. So understanding, okay, where are the gaps? How do we fill in those gaps? And really, is this modern economic system, does it really achieve its full potential if we're leaving large percentages of the population behind? I think having that degree of empathy and understanding will make you even more successful, regardless of the particular pathway or concentration that you take in the next few years. So it's absolutely essential.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. I think this sort of circles back to some of the initial comments that both Professor Ashish and Professor Rajkumar made, that we are very privileged. And I think that gaze, that understanding and that acknowledgement needs to be there as we step into the wonderful future that has been laid out for us. Thank you so much, Dr. Verma, for spending, I know it's an unusual time for you. So thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time with us today. We are all very grateful for your time, and we all learned so much from you. So I would like everyone here on the panel to sort of join me in thanking you for your time and for your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It really has been a great honor to be with you, and I hope to see you all in person one day very soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to invite Professor Patnaik, who is a professor and registrar at the university. He contributes very actively and plays one of the most crucial roles in the development and implementation of the academic and administrative strategies for the university. And he's responsible for overseeing the academic and administrative matters, both within the university and also providing a suitable direction for any of these strategies. With that, Professor Sridhar Patnaik, the floor is all yours. We would love to hear your thoughts and to welcome the new batch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shohini. I do have a challenge here because after listening to such a wonderful speech, I even do not know what to say because that's such a fascinating speech. And we just heard a speaker delivering a talk to the School of Government and Public Policy, wherein he emphasized upon the aspect of interdependence. And the speech that we just heard Dr. Richard Verma deliver is such a logical extension of where the previous speaker ended, with a powerful message that we need to embrace all partners in the society, coming from all walks of life, as we look forward towards a healthy, safer, and a better world, and more so during these pandemic times. So on this particular note, not only I just wanted to thank Dr. Verma for his time, but this is indeed a crucial sort of a message to all our students at the School of Banking and Finance who joined the 3 years BCom and the BA honors in finance and entrepreneurship, that this is what you can expect being here at the JSBF. And I take this opportunity on my own behalf and on the behalf of everyone at the university to welcome you to the school and also to congratulate you on this wonderful achievement. And we are certain that as you move forward, you're going to take advantage of your presence at the Jindal Global University and benefit from your classroom lectures and your wonderful faculty members and the number of courses that we offer across all schools and programs. And also to help you induct into the school, there was a program entitled the Pre-Semester Immersion Training and Engagement Program that was organized, which I believe most of you had attended. And going forward, we will also have university resource orientation before you start your classes on 16th of August in an online mode, which is unfortunate, but nonetheless, that's what we could do at the moment to ensure continuity of the education. But as Dr. Verma's lecture he had referred to, these are the kind of lectures and ideas and takeaways you'll have from the program and also from the university. And it's going to be an exceptional experience. But again, taking cue from Dr. Verma, you need to develop a sense of empathy for all your friends, peers, and teachers and other staff members at the university, because our university is such a diverse place. So as you work towards your own prosperity, but also share your interests with others and treat others with due respect, and also respect the regulations. And that's what is going to ensure that we all prosper and grow together. So congratulations, everyone. And we are also grateful to Dr. Verma once again for his scintillating talk.
Thank you, Professor Patnaik. We started the conversation talking about how the world is fractured and broken. But let me come back to show you, now that we have had a conversation about inclusion and empathy and interdependence and learning, let me come back to the hopeful bit, right? All of us present here, and hopefully the conversation in the past 1 hour gives you a sense of possibility and hope. And inheriting a broken world actually means that you're inheriting a world that you can fix. And there is possibility there. There isn't any possibility in utopia, but there is possibility in dystopia. This Monday marks the first step towards a future that is yours for taking. And I'm going to quote, Black Panther's one of its famous songs by Kendrick Lamar called All the Stars, the chorus of which goes, "This may be the night that my dreams might let me know all the stars are closer." I'm hoping, and this is a message both to all of us, to the incoming batches, but also to everyone present here, that let 2021 be the year that the stars come closer for all of us. The stars are ours for the taking. The world is ours for the taking. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this extraordinary event that we had to conduct online. We simply cannot wait to meet you all, both in an online world, but also in the physical world. And we're hoping, Dr. Verma, we can also host you one day on campus. Thank you to everyone present here.